I am Kelli Mackie Foster. I am the Detroit Eviction Prevention Director at Lakeshore Legal Aid. Lakeshore Legal Aid is a nonprofit law firm that provides legal advice and representation to low-income people, seniors, survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. I have been a legal aid attorney my entire career and represented tenants for, at this point, it's about 16 years. The SARA program is the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And what that does is it provides financial assistance for unpaid rent, back utilities, and internet services. As a renter, you have rights. And one of those rights is that before you can be evicted, there has to be an order signed by a judge. A landlord can't lock your doors, shut off your utilities, make threats or violence against you to make you move. You only have to move once there's a signed order by a judge. In order to legally rent property in the city of Detroit, the property needs to be registered as a rental. It has to be kept in good repair. There has to be an inspection by the city, and they have to receive what's called a certificate of compliance. If your landlord hasn't done those steps, you have additional defenses to an eviction. Any time that you receive a court summons or a notice of a hearing, it's very important that you go to that hearing. Even if you think you're covered under the moratorium or because you're participating in the SARA program, still show up for court. If your landlord wants to evict you, the first thing they have to do is provide you notice. That notice will come from the landlord. Usually it's put on your door. It's a form. It will explain why they want to evict you and what your next steps should be. If you receive a notice, apply for the SARA program. To apply, go to DetroitEvictionHelp.com. If you received a notice, the second step is that your landlord can file a summons and complaint against you. The timing of when that can happen depends on what type of case they've filed against you. The summons and complaint will tell you your court date. It'll give you Zoom instructions and connections to resources. If you receive a summons and complaint, make sure you appear for court, even if you think you're covered under the moratorium or you are in the SARA process. The next step is a pretrial. That's your first chance to be face-to-face with a judge. You will also have the opportunity to speak with somebody from legal aid about your rights and different processes, and you'll get your next date that you have to come back to court. At the pretrial, you're going to get your date for your second hearing. Between the pretrial and the second hearing, a lot of things can happen. The second hearing, the judge is going to want to know what's happened during that time period. If after your pretrial and your second hearing and you haven't been able to reach an agreement with your landlord, the judge will schedule a trial. What happens at the trial is the landlord explains why they think you should be evicted, and it's your chance to explain to the judge any defenses you have. After the trial, the judge is going to make a decision and put that in a judgment. The judgment is going to tell you what the next steps are. A judgment being entered is just one of the possible resolutions that could happen. What happens in most cases, though, is the parties settle. They can agree to different terms. We often do this in what's called a conditional dismissal, which works out well for all parties. What a conditional dismissal does, it means that the parties have reached an agreement. It'll lay out what the terms of that agreement is. If the tenant complies with what they're supposed to do, the whole case gets dismissed. If they don't, the landlord still has their rights then to move forward with eviction. At the end of your case, you're going to either have a judgment or a conditional dismissal. Both will lay out what the terms are, either that's been ordered by the judge or that the parties have agreed to. If the tenant doesn't do what they're supposed to do in the judgment or the conditional dismissal, the landlord has a right to apply for what's called a writ of eviction. The writ of eviction is what then triggers the bailiff coming to someone's home and physically removing them from the property. In each part of the eviction process, there are different documents for each different stage. A DFP stands for demand for possession. It's also known as a 7-day notice. That is the notice that you will receive if your landlord is evicting you for non-payment of rent. Another type of notice is an NTQ, and that's a notice to quit, or also known as a 30-day notice. So a 30-day notice is used if a landlord wants to terminate your tenancy. It could be because you're a month-to-month tenant, you have violated your lease in some way, or your lease has ended. Once you get to the summons and complaint stage in an eviction case, what that means is you've been served with a complaint. And either it's for non-payment of rent or for termination of tenancy. It's really easy to know which one it is because it's at the very top of the document that you're going to be served with. The complaint is also going to tell you when your first hearing is. A judgment or a conditional dismissal explains what the parties are supposed to do. It's a written document that will be signed by the court. So if a tenant hasn't complied with the terms of a judgment or a conditional dismissal, the landlord can ask the court to sign what's called a writ of eviction or an application for a writ. The tenant, you're not necessarily going to see that document, but it's an official document and it has to be signed by a judge for it to be enforced. Once you're in the eviction process, it's important to know that you have rights. That looks like several different options and different things. And so once you receive notice, I strongly encourage you to contact legal aid or to call the Detroit Eviction Helpline. Some of your rights. You have the right to raise any defenses that you have, either orally to the judge or in writing. You also have the right to countersue your landlord if they've done something that you think is wrong. You also have the right to have a trial that is either heard by a judge or by a jury. You also have the right to ask the judge to order repairs to be made. If you've received a notice of eviction, it's important to know that you have rights. To learn more about those rights and what they are, call legal aid or call the Detroit Eviction Helpline. The Detroit Eviction Helpline is 888-313-2520, or you can visit DetroitEvictionHelp.com. Always, it's important if you've been served with notice or a complaint or at any stage, you can apply for SARA. To apply for SARA, go to DetroitEvictionHelp.com. Once you're in the court eviction process, right now, all hearings are being done on Zoom. And so what you can expect on Zoom is during each one of your court hearings, there's a team of legal aid attorneys who are there to talk to you. The judge will ask if you want to speak to someone and put you in a breakout room. They will try to figure out if you qualify for any programs, if you have other defenses. They'll give you advice, and in some cases, they'll represent you. The legal professionals that you're going to talk to is a free service, so that's important. Also, you should know that they're there to help you through the process to figure out what your options are and what you should do next. Due to COVID, the first piece of advice in almost all cases is to have a tenant apply for the SARA program. The SARA program is the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program. There are certain situations where the eviction process looks a little different. There's lots of different types of cases that fall into that category, but there are two important ones because so many residents in the city of Detroit are in that situation. And so one is subsidized housing. So if you're in subsidized housing, you actually have some more protections from eviction. The other are if you're in a land contract. And so unfortunately, if you're in a land contract, you don't qualify for the SARA financial assistance or under the CDC order. Everyone's case looks a little different. It's important to know to call the Detroit Eviction Helpline as soon as you receive a notice of eviction. It's also important to know that if you have questions, call the Detroit Eviction Helpline or legal aid, and they will talk through the process with you and help you find your best way forward. Any eviction case is going to come to some type of resolution. What that resolution is or looks like is dependent on what's happening in your case and will look a little different for everyone. Some of the resolutions may include the SARA program, agree to a move-out date, agree to a payment plan, conditional dismissal. You also can potentially have your case resolved by filing a case against your landlord. This isn't a comprehensive list of all of the outcomes possible. It's just what we most commonly see. If you've received a notice of eviction, it's important to know that you have rights. To learn more about those rights and what they are, call legal aid or call the Detroit Eviction Helpline. The Detroit Eviction Helpline is 888-313-2520, or you can visit DetroitEvictionHelp.com.